The Dowager Duchess had chosen her the way one chooses curtains, for her ability to hang quietly in the background and complement the existing arrangement without drawing attention to herself. Nell Ashford knew this because the Dowager had said so. Not in those words. The Dowager Duchess of Moresby was too refined for such bluntness, but in the particular way she had presented Nell to her son on the afternoon of their introduction, standing in the drawing room at Moresby Park with her hand on Nell's elbow, guiding her forward the way one guides a piece of furniture into position. This is Miss Ashford. She is everything we discussed. Everything we discussed. Nell had heard those words and understood them perfectly. She was 22. She was the daughter of Sir Harold Ashford, a baronet of modest means and less ambition, whose estate in Suffolk produced just enough income to maintain the illusion of gentility without the substance to support it. She was pretty in a way that no one remarked upon. Pleasant features, fair hair, a manner so agreeable that it bordered on invisibility. She played the pianoforte competently. She danced adequately. She had been educated sufficiently. She was, in every particular, sufficient, which was precisely the quality the Dowager had been looking for. The Dowager had been looking for a daughter-in-law who would not challenge her. This was not a secret. It was the architecture of the entire arrangement, as visible and load-bearing as the columns in the entrance hall. The Dowager had run Moresby Park for 31 years, first as the Duke's wife and then as his widow, and she had no intention of surrendering the household to a young woman with opinions. She needed someone who would produce an heir, attend the appropriate social functions, and otherwise defer to the Dowager's authority in all matters domestic, social, and, most critically, concerning her son. Her son was the problem. Arthur Wyndham, 6th Duke of Moresby, was 30, and he was tired of his mother. He would not have said so. He was too well bred for such directness, and too kind to wound a woman who had raised him alone after his father's death when Arthur was 9. But Nell saw it on his face the moment the Dowager presented her. Not irritation, exactly. Something closer to resignation. The face of a man who had been managed his entire life and who had stopped resisting. Because resistance required energy, he preferred to spend elsewhere. He was tall and lean, with brown hair that needed cutting and the distracted expression of a man whose mind was perpetually engaged with something more interesting than whatever was happening in front of him. He dressed well but without care. His valet clearly made the decisions, and his hands, which Nell noticed because she noticed hands, were stained with ink at the fingertips. He had been writing, or reading, or both. He was, she would later learn, always either writing or reading, frequently simultaneously, and the ink stains were so permanent a feature of his person that Mrs. Cathcart, the housekeeper, had stopped trying to remove them from his cuffs and had simply ordered additional white shirts. "Miss Ashford," he said, inclining his head. "A pleasure." "Your Grace," she said. She curtsied. The curtsy was perfect, depth, duration, angle, because her mother had drilled it into her since childhood, along with every other gesture of compliance that constituted a young woman's education in the Ashford household. Nell curtsied the way she did everything, correctly, pleasantly, and with the absolute minimum of self visible beneath the performance. The Dowager beamed. "Shall we take tea?" They took tea. The Dowager led the conversation with the practiced authority of a woman who considered conversation a form of governance. She asked Nell about Suffolk, about her father's estate, about her accomplishments, the pianoforte, the watercolors, the needlework, and Nell answered each question with the polished docility that the Dowager had been promised by Lady Whitfield, who had recommended Nell with the specific endorsement. "She will give you no trouble." Arthur drank his tea and said very little. He looked out the window twice. He shifted in his chair 3 times. He was, Nell observed, counting the minutes until this was over, and he was doing it with the quiet desperation of a man who had been through this particular performance many times before and knew exactly how long it lasted. On the 4th occasion that his gaze drifted to the window, Nell followed it. Beyond the glass, the grounds of Moresby Park stretched toward a line of ancient oaks, and beneath the oaks, partly obscured by the angle of the window, was a structure she could not quite identify, something between a greenhouse and a workshop, with glass panels on the roof and what appeared to be a telescope mounted on a platform beside it. "What is that building?" she said. The Dowager's mouth tightened, Arthur's gaze came back from the window. For the first time since the introduction, he looked at Nell directly, not with the polite, unfocused attention of a man going through the motions, but with the sharp, specific interest of someone whose private world had just been acknowledged. "That is my observatory," he said. "I study. Arthur's hobbies are very absorbing," the Dowager said in the tone one uses to close a subject. "More tea, Miss Ashford?" "I should like to hear about the observatory," Nell said. The words came out before she could stop them. They were not the words of the woman the Dowager had chosen. They were not agreeable, not deferential, not the appropriate response to a social cue that clearly meant, "Do not pursue this." They were the words of a different Nell, the one who existed beneath the curtsies and the pleasant smile and the watercolors, the one who had been sealed away so thoroughly that her occasional appearances startled even herself. The Dowager's expression did not change, but the temperature at the tea table dropped by several degrees. Arthur set down his cup. "I study astronomy," he said. "I have been cataloging variable stars in the constellation of Cygnus for the past 3 years. The observatory allows me to make observations year-round, which the Royal Astronomical Society has found useful, though my mother considers it an eccentricity." "It is an eccentricity," the Dowager said, "but a harmless one." "Variable stars change their brightness over time," Arthur continued, speaking to Nell now as though his mother had not spoken. "The question is whether the variation is intrinsic, the star itself changing, or extrinsic, caused by something passing between us and the star. The distinction matters because it tells us whether we are seeing the object as it truly is, or only as it appears." He stopped. He looked at her. And Nell understood, with a clarity that arrived like a window being thrown open in a room she had assumed was sealed, that he was not talking about stars. The courtship, if it could be called that, proceeded along the lines the Dowager had drawn. Nell visited Moresby Park twice more during the season. She sat in the drawing room and answered questions and played a piece on the pianoforte that was technically accomplished and emotionally vacant, which was what was expected. And she wore the dresses her mother had selected and smiled the smile her mother had approved and did everything that everything we discussed required her to do. Arthur proposed on her 3rd visit. He did it in the drawing room, with his mother present, in the manner that the Dowager had clearly choreographed, formal, brief, and concluded with a handshake rather than any gesture that might suggest actual feeling. Nell accepted. She accepted because she had been raised to accept, because her father needed the connection, because her mother had told her that this was the best she could hope for, and Nell, who had spent 22 years being told what she could hope for and adjusting her expectations accordingly, believed her. They married in the chapel at Moresby in September. The wedding was elegant, restrained, and entirely the Dowager's production. Nell wore a gown the Dowager had selected. The flowers were the Dowager's choice. The music was the Dowager's preference. Nell walked down the aisle and thought, "I am marrying a house, not a man, and the house already has a mistress." The first month was precisely what the Dowager had intended. Nell occupied the rooms that had been designated for the Duchess, a suite on the 2nd floor that had been redecorated in pale blue, a color the Dowager had chosen because it was calming and which Nell privately found oppressive. She breakfasted with Arthur, who read the astronomical journals that arrived weekly from London and occasionally looked up to ask if she was well. She lunched with the Dowager, who asked questions that were not questions, but instructions disguised as conversation. "You will wear the cream silk to the Fenwicks' dinner, of course. The household menus are managed by Mrs. Cathcart and myself. You need not trouble yourself. Arthur prefers to dine early. You will find it easier to adjust your own schedule." Nell adjusted. She adjusted the way she had adjusted her entire life, smoothly, invisibly, without complaint. She wore the cream silk. She deferred to Mrs. Cathcart. She dined early. She was, in every measurable particular, obedient. And Arthur watched her. She did not realize he was watching at first. He was a man who appeared permanently distracted, always reading, always thinking, always half present in the room and half present somewhere in the constellation of Cygnus, and Nell had assumed that his abstraction meant inattention. She was wrong. Arthur Wyndham was not inattentive. He was observing. He had been trained, by 3 years of tracking infinitesimal variations in starlight, to notice the difference between what something appeared to be and what it actually was, and he had been applying this skill to his wife since the wedding. He noticed that she read. Not the improving literature that the Dowager had stocked in the pale blue sitting room, sermons, collections of moral essays, a tedious memoir by a bishop's wife, but other things, hidden things. He found a copy of Mary Wollstonecraft beneath her needlework basket. He found a volume of Linnaeus wedged behind the cushion of the window seat. He found, in the drawer of her writing desk, a notebook filled with small, precise observations about the plants in the garden, not the ornamental gardens that the Dowager maintained for visitors, but the kitchen garden where the herbs grew and where Nell had been walking every morning at 7 o'clock when the household was still asleep and the Dowager's authority did not yet extend to the outdoors. He noticed that she had opinions. They emerged in fragments, a word here, a glance there, a question that she asked, and then immediately retracted as though catching herself doing something forbidden. At dinner, when Lord Pemberton mentioned the Reform Bill, Nell's hand tightened on her glass, and her lips parted, and then closed, and the opinion she had been about to express retreated behind the pleasant smile like a tide pulling back from a shore it was not permitted to touch. He noticed that she was unhappy. Not dramatically. Nell was not the kind of woman who announced her unhappiness or displayed it for sympathy. She was unhappy in the way that a plant is unhappy when it has been placed in the wrong soil, still alive, still growing, still producing the expected leaves and flowers, but leaning toward the light with a desperation that anyone paying attention would recognize as the difference between surviving and living. Arthur was paying attention. On a morning in late October, 6 weeks after the wedding, he knocked on the door of the pale blue sitting room. Nell was inside with her needlework basket, and beneath it, a copy of Erasmus Darwin's The Botanic Garden, which she had borrowed from the library and was reading in sections small enough to conceal quickly. "May I come in?" he said. "Of course." She closed Darwin and slid it beneath the basket with a motion so practiced it was nearly invisible. Nearly. Arthur sat down. He did not sit in the chair the Dowager had designated for visitors, a stiff-backed piece near the door that enforced formality, but in the window seat where the light was better and where Nell's hidden Linnaeus had left a faint rectangular impression on the cushion that he suspected only he had noticed. "I would like to show you the observatory," he said. "The observatory? You asked about it. On the first afternoon, you were the only person who has ever asked about it, including my mother, who considers it an embarrassment, and Lady Whitfield, who considers it a sign of instability. You asked, and my mother changed the subject, and you did not ask again. I would like you to ask again." Nell looked at her needlework basket. She looked at the door beyond which the Dowager's authority began and Nell's real self ended. She looked at Arthur, who was sitting in the window seat with ink on his fingers and an expression she had not seen before, not the distracted abstraction of a man lost in thought, but the focused, patient attention of a man who had been watching a variable star for 6 weeks and had finally identified the pattern. "Your mother would not approve," she said. "My mother does not approve of most things that matter. She approved of you because she believed you would not challenge her. I am asking whether she was right." The silence lasted a long time. Nell felt it the way she felt everything important, not as a single moment but as a series of small collapses, the quiet dismantling of a structure she had spent 22 years building, the obedient girl coming apart brick by brick to reveal whatever was underneath. "She was not right," Nell said. "She was not wrong either. She chose correctly. I'm exactly what she described. But what she described is not all of what I am. It is simply all of what I have been permitted to show." Arthur nodded. He stood. He offered her his hand. "Then come and see the observatory," he said, "and show me the rest." The observatory was extraordinary. It was part workshop, part library, part cathedral, a space built entirely for seeing clearly, with instruments calibrated to detect light that the naked eye could not perceive, and shelves stacked with notebooks filled with Arthur's careful hand, 3 years of observations recorded with a precision that Nell recognized instantly, because it was the same precision she brought to her own hidden notebook, the one about the kitchen garden. Arthur showed her the telescope. He showed her his star charts. He explained variable stars, the slow, rhythmic brightening and dimming of Mira and Cetus, the sudden explosions of novae, the eclipsing binaries where one star passes in front of another and the light drops, not because anything has changed, but because something is in the way. "That is what my mother does," he said. "She is an eclipsing binary. She stands between people and what they actually are, and the light drops and everyone assumes the person is dimmed. But they have not dimmed. They are simply being obscured." Nell looked at him through the eyepiece of the telescope, where a single star burned steadily in the dark. "And you can tell the difference." "It is what I do," he said. "I look at things that appear to change, and I determine whether the change is real or whether something is blocking the view." "And what do you see when you look at me?" "I see a woman who hides Wollstonecraft under her needlework and Linnaeus behind her cushion and wakes at 7 to walk in the kitchen garden because it is the only hour of the day when no one is watching. I see a woman who almost spoke about the reform bill at dinner and caught herself because she has been taught that her opinions are a liability rather than an asset. I see a woman who plays the pianoforte as though she is afraid to mean it." He paused. "I see a woman who has been told she is obedient and has made herself so because the alternative was too frightening. But obedience is not who you are. It is what has been done to you." Nell stood in the observatory with the telescope and the star charts and the ink-stained notebooks, and she felt something she had not felt since childhood, since before her mother had begun the long, patient work of sanding away every edge and every corner until Nell was smooth enough to fit into whatever space was offered to her. She felt the edges returning, the corners, the inconvenient, sharp, interesting parts of herself that had been filed away. "I would like to learn about variable stars," she said. "I would like to teach you. Your mother will not approve." "My mother approved of an idea of you. I am interested in the reality. The reality is more complicated and considerably more worth knowing." They began that evening. After dinner, which the Dowager dominated with a discussion of the Christmas arrangements that required no input from either of them, Arthur led Nell to the observatory where the sky had cleared and Cygnus was visible above the oaks. He showed her how to use the telescope. He showed her how to record observations. He explained the mathematics of orbital periods and the physics of stellar atmospheres. And when he paused to check whether she was overwhelmed, she said, "The apparent magnitude formula, is it logarithmic?" He stared at her. "Where did you learn that?" "My father's library had a copy of Herschel's astronomical tables. I read it when I was 14 because there was nothing else to read, and I was curious. I understood approximately a third of it. I've been carrying the other 2/3 as unanswered questions for 8 years. Arthur sat down on the observatory steps and looked at his wife. This woman his mother had chosen because she was obedient, this woman who had curtsied perfectly and played competently and smiled pleasantly, and hidden Herschel in her memory the way she hid Wollstonecraft in her basket. And he laughed. Not the polite laugh of the drawing room, but the real one. The delighted, incredulous laugh of a man who had been looking at an apparently dim star and discovered it was, in fact, blazing. They returned to the observatory the following night, and the night after that. The sessions lasted longer each time, an hour, then 2, then 3, until Mrs. Cathcart stopped setting out the candles in the drawing room after dinner because she knew they would not be used. Arthur taught her the constellations. He taught her the mathematics of parallax and the geometry of orbital mechanics. He taught her how to grind a lens and how to calibrate the telescope's equatorial mount and how to read the atmospheric seeing conditions to know when the sky was steady enough for precise measurement. Nell absorbed it with a hunger that frightened her. Not the material. The material was difficult but learnable, and she had always been a quick study when the subject mattered, but the experience of being taught. No one had ever taught her anything they considered important. Her mother had taught her needlework and deportment. Her governess had taught her French and watercolor. Her pianoforte teacher had taught her technique. All of it had been designed to make her presentable, to equip her for display, like an object being prepared for sale. Arthur was teaching her something that existed entirely for its own sake, that had no purpose beyond understanding, and the feeling of being trusted with it, of being considered capable of it, was so unfamiliar that she sometimes had to stop and breathe and remind herself that she was permitted to be here. One evening in November, 3 weeks into her education, she was recording an observation when Arthur said, from the other side of the observatory where he was reviewing her previous notes, "You have better handwriting than I do." "Everyone has better handwriting than you." "That is true, but yours is particularly precise. The numbers are clear. The decimal points are exactly placed. You record the time to the second. You note the atmospheric conditions and the instrument settings. You are meticulous." I have been keeping a secret notebook about the kitchen garden for 3 years. I cataloged 47 species of herb by Latin name, growing conditions, soil preferences, and medicinal applications. Meticulousness is not new to me. Having permission to practice it openly is. Arthur set down her notes. He crossed the observatory. He stood beside her at the telescope and said, "Play the pianoforte tonight. It is 11:30. Play it as though you mean it." She looked at him. He looked at her. The observatory was dark except for the lamp on the desk and the stars through the open dome above them. And in the quiet, Nell felt the last of the obedient girl give way, not with a crash, not with a dramatic revelation, but with the quiet, definitive click of a mechanism releasing, a lock opening, a door that had been sealed for 22 years finally, permanently, swinging wide. They went inside. She sat at the pianoforte in the empty drawing room at midnight. She played Beethoven, the Pathétique, which she had learned at 15 and performed exactly once for her mother, who had said it was too much and suggested she return to Haydn. She played it now the way it was meant to be played, with force, with fury, with the full weight of everything she had been told to suppress. The notes filled the drawing room and the corridor and the staircase, and Mrs. Cathcart heard it from the servants' hall and said nothing, and the dowager heard it from her bedroom and lay in the dark, listening to her obedient daughter-in-law play Beethoven at midnight with a ferocity that made the windows vibrate. Arthur stood in the doorway and listened, and when she finished, breathing hard, her hands trembling, the last chord still ringing in the air, he said, "There, that is who you are." The dowager noticed the change before she understood its cause. Nell began appearing at breakfast with questions about the estate, about the tenants, about the household accounts that the dowager had kept firmly in her own control. The questions were polite. They were deferential. They were delivered with the same pleasant smile that had made the dowager select her in the first place. But they were questions, and they required answers, and the dowager, who had not been questioned about the management of Moresby in 31 years, found the experience profoundly unsettling. "You might remind Miss Ashford, the Duchess, that the household arrangements are well established," the dowager said to Arthur over luncheon when Nell was visiting the vicar's wife. "You might tell her yourself, Mother. She is your daughter-in-law. I chose her because she was agreeable. You chose her because you thought she was compliant. She is not compliant. She is intelligent, and she has been hiding it because every person in her life has rewarded her for concealment. I will not continue that pattern." The dowager set down her soup spoon with the controlled precision of a woman who was accustomed to being the most formidable person in any room and was discovering, with considerable displeasure, that her son had opinions of his own. "Arthur," she said, "I have managed this household for 31 years, and you have managed it well. But Nell is the Duchess now, and the Duchess should manage the household. That is, as you have told me many times, the natural order." He had used her own argument against her. The dowager recognized this. She did not like it, but she was too intelligent to fight a battle she could not win with weapons she had supplied to the enemy herself. The transition happened slowly. Not because Nell was timid. She was not timid. She had never been timid. She had simply been required to perform timidity so consistently that the performance had become indistinguishable from the thing itself, but because she understood, with the strategic intelligence that the dowager had mistaken for compliance, that taking power too quickly would create conflict, and conflict would cost Arthur more than it would gain her. She took the household accounts first. Mrs. Cathcart, who had been managing them under the dowager's direction, surrendered them with the barely concealed relief of a woman who had been doing someone else's job for 31 years and was deeply grateful to hand it over. Nell found inefficiencies. Of course she did, because she was Nell, and finding inefficiencies was what she did when she was not being required to smile and curtsy, and she corrected them with the same quiet precision she brought to everything. She took the garden next. Not the ornamental gardens. Those remained the dowager's domain, because the dowager cared about them, and taking something from a person who cared about it was cruelty, not strategy. She took the kitchen garden, which had been neglected, and she expanded it. Herbs first, then vegetables, then a small section for the botanical specimens she had been studying in secret for years, the ones from Darwin and Linnaeus, the plants she had known by their Latin names since she was 14 and had never been permitted to say so. She took the tenants. She visited them, not with the dowager's formal charity, the baskets of food delivered with the gracious condescension of a woman for whom the poor were an obligation rather than a community, but with genuine attention. She learned their names. She learned their needs. She discovered that the tenants on the northern boundary had been petitioning for a new well for 3 years, and that the petition had been filed by the dowager in a drawer and forgotten, not from malice, but from the particular blindness of a woman who believed that managing an estate meant managing its appearance rather than its substance. Nell built the well. Arthur funded it. The dowager said nothing, but she began, almost imperceptibly, to defer. A word here, a question there, the slow and grudging recognition of a woman who had chosen a curtain and discovered she had acquired a pillar. On an evening in April, 7 months after the wedding, Nell was in the observatory. She had been recording observations for 3 months now, her own notebook, her own handwriting, her own data, and she had found something. A variation in one of Arthur's Cygnus stars that did not match the expected pattern. The dimming was irregular, unpredictable, and it did not correspond to any eclipsing body in Arthur's calculations. Arthur checked her work. He checked it twice. He sat at the observatory desk with her notebook and his star charts and the logarithmic tables, and he looked at the numbers and he said, "You are right. The variation is intrinsic. The star itself is changing." What does that mean? It means you have made an original astronomical observation. It means your data needs to be sent to the Royal Astronomical Society. It means he stopped. He looked at her in the lamplight. This woman his mother had chosen for her obedience, and who was sitting in his observatory at midnight with ink on her fingers, making discoveries that the professional astronomers in Greenwich had missed. It means you were never dim. You were never even close to dim. You were obscured. And now you are not. Nell looked at her notebook. She looked at the star charts. She looked at her husband, who had taken her to the observatory and given her the telescope and taught her the mathematics, and waited, patiently, deliberately, with the trained attention of a man who knew how to watch for the moment when the light returns, for her to show him who she actually was. "Your mother chose me because I was obedient," she said. "My mother chose an idea of you. And you?" "I chose you because you asked about the observatory. One question. One moment where the performance slipped and the real person looked through. That was enough." Enough for what? Enough to know that the dim star was not dim, that the light was there, that someone just needed to move out of the way. The dowager retired to the dower house in June. It was presented as her choice. She was 63, and the dower house had been renovated, and the garden there was particularly fine. And in many ways, it was her choice, made with the pragmatic intelligence of a woman who recognized that her era at Moresby had ended, and that the woman who had replaced her was not the obedient girl she had selected, but someone altogether more formidable. The transition was not acrimonious. Nell would not permit it to be. She understood something about the dowager that Arthur, who had been managed by his mother for 30 years, could not see clearly, that the dowager's need for control was not malice, it was fear. She had lost her husband at 32 and had been left with an estate, a title, and a 9-year-old son, and she had survived by controlling everything within her reach, because the alternative, trusting other people to manage what she had been left to protect, required a faith in others that her widowhood had destroyed. Nell understood this because she recognized it. The dowager had built a fortress of control around Moresby for the same reason Nell had built a fortress of obedience around herself, because the world had taught them both that vulnerability was dangerous, and the only difference between them was the form their armor took. The dowager armored herself with authority. Nell had armored herself with compliance. Neither of them had been free. On the morning the dowager moved to the dower house, Nell walked her through the garden, the ornamental garden, the dowager's garden, which Nell had deliberately left untouched, and she said, "I should like you to continue managing this garden. It is yours. You built it, and you understand it, and I would not presume to improve upon something that does not need improvement." The dowager looked at the roses she had planted 20 years ago, and the lavender border she had designed, and the espaliered pear trees she had trained along the south wall with the same patient determination she had brought to everything. She looked at Nell, who was standing beside her in the morning light with ink on her fingers and the pleasant smile entirely absent, replaced by something the dowager had not expected: respect. Not deference. Nell had stopped deferring weeks ago, but genuine respect, offered freely by a woman who owed her nothing. "You are not what I chose," the dowager said. "No, you are better." She said this quietly, as though the admission cost her something, which it did. "I chose a girl who would not challenge me. I got a woman who challenged my son to become the man I always hoped he would be. The result is not what I intended, but it is," she paused, "it is satisfactory." From the Dowager Duchess of Moresby, this was the equivalent of a standing ovation. She visited every Sunday for dinner. She brought opinions about the garden and the menu and the appropriate length of hemlines, and Nell received every opinion with the same pleasant smile that had won the dowager's approval in the first place. The smile that the dowager now understood too late had never been compliance at all. It had been patience. Their son was born the following spring. They named him William, after Herschel, which the dowager considered eccentric and which Nell considered exactly right. The dowager held her grandson on the first afternoon and said, "He has Arthur's eyes and your determination. God help us all." It was, Mrs. Cathcart reported to the cook, the closest to a joke the dowager had made in 31 years of service. On a clear night in September, a year after the wedding, Nell sat in the observatory with William asleep in a basket beside the telescope and the notebook open on her knee. Arthur came in from the house carrying 2 cups of tea and the latest correspondence from the Royal Astronomical Society, which had published her observation under the name N. Wyndham and had asked for further data. "They want more observations," he said. "They will get them. Cygnus is well positioned for the next 3 months." He sat beside her. He looked at the baby, who was sleeping with the profound commitment that only very small children bring to sleep. He looked at his wife, who was reviewing her star charts with ink on her fingers and a pencil behind her ear, and the pleasant smile nowhere in evidence, replaced by the focused, unguarded expression of a woman who was finally doing the thing she was meant to do. "My mother chose you because you were obedient," he said. "You have mentioned this. I chose you because you were not." She looked at him over the top of the star charts. "You did not know I was not obedient. You suspected. I observe variable stars for a living. I know the difference between a star that is dim and a star that is being blocked. You were being blocked. I could see the light leaking around the edges. That is the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me, and it is about astrophysics. Everything worth saying is about astrophysics." She laughed. The real laugh, the uncontrolled one, the one that had nothing pleasant or obedient about it, and everything to do with the uncomplicated joy of being married to a man who saw the universe in everything and saw her in the universe. William stirred in his basket and settled. The telescope pointed at Cygnus, where a star that had once appeared dim was burning steadily, brightly, without obstruction, and inside the observatory at Moresby Park, the Duke and the Duchess sat together in the dark, looking up, and the sky was full of light. If this story stayed with you, you might find the next one does too. They arrive here like a star that was always burning, waiting only for someone to look whenever they are ready.